All right.
He punted on it.
Welcome to our City Council meeting for tonight, June 26, 2019. We will begin with an invocation by Christ the King Catholic Church and Father Komar, and then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ken Nelson.
Thank you for the invitation. Almighty God, thank you for being with us. Thank you for gathering us here so we can serve the whole community, the whole of all creation. Because we all, every single human being, is your child and daughter. Thank you, God, for giving us wisdom. Help us to make wise, good decisions so we can be known as your servants. Thank you, God, for gathering us here today. Thank you for giving us life. Thank you that our life can be improved and developed by serving the others. We ask you to stay with us every day because you are God who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you both. We will now move on to our agenda order approval. Are there any items the council would like changed from the published agenda? And if not, can we get a motion to approve?
Mayor, I know Dallin's flying home from Bend, Oregon, and he's going to be late. I think he's going to catch that 6:00 flight. So I know it's towards the end of the agenda, the ice rink issue, but maybe if we can, I know it's, maybe if we have to bump it a couple more if we could,
Yeah, we'll make sure we don't do that one until he gets here.
Other than that, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as listed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll go to council business.
Yeah, I have one thing, and it's more a question than anything. It's probably going to come up in the next few months a lot, and that's weeds and how dry the weeds are getting and whatnot. So my question is, I don't know, does the city own, I don't even know what machine's called, but I know the state has one where you can drive along and you can sort of spray. I'm concerned about all the weeds that are coming up in the sidewalks all the way along all of the roads and streets in the city. Do we have such a thing that can drive along and spray those? I don't even know Ryan's not here, so.
We had money in a budget. I don't remember if it was in 1819 or 1920 for Jeff to buy a truck and a sprayer and a tank and that sort of equipment.
We just don't know if we have it yet or if it's, because it's in next year's budget. Is that correct?
I don't remember if it was in last year or in the current budget or the next budget. I can't remember, but I know we budgeted that at one time.
Because something like that's got to happen that way. You can't walk around and individually, take out your weed killer and spray every little sidewalk. But they're everywhere. They're just amazing, and it's going to get worse.
So the county has a weed abatement, they have a full-time guy that just takes care of weeds. I wonder if we could maybe do some kind of interlocal agreement with them.
We pay him already every year a certain amount of money that we have budgeted in streets to come and kill as much Scotch thistle as we can.
Great.
So we kind of target that towards the Scotch thistle.
Rather than buying our own stuff, I wonder if it, if we wanted to go a little further, I wonder if it might be paid to maybe make an arrangement with the county to help us with some of those things.
I mean, Sage Drive is really bad right now. They're all along Megaplex theaters and all that area, but it's everywhere.
No, that area particularly, when we had the Sparkle campaign, we took all those weeds out.
And guess what? They grow back.
They're all
They grow back.
They had a real nice spring.
Yeah. Anyway, if it's something we could look into it, because I think it's just an ongoing issue that we're going to have.
Thank you.
I had a couple of comments too. One of them is on weeds. Thank you, Ken, for getting on the aquatic center.
Thank you, sir.
I know he personally went out, pulled and trimmed some of those weeds and whatnot. It looks really good. Thank you. Weeds are becoming a big complaint item all around town.
Yep.
So we appreciate Wade was out there planting new trees at the aquatic center, and I guess the crews were by the interchanges spraying, trying to get control. So I want to compliment you, but cheer you on. Everybody is complaining about weeds, but I would like to make a plea to the whole city, thinking of the Sparkle campaign last year. It's not just the city properties, it's all of our properties. There are weeds everywhere. And so I would hope that everybody would try and start pulling and cleaning their property up, all the businesses, even on Main Street and whatnot. There's a lot of them that have lots of weeds. The other thing I wanted to do is just bring one thing. When I was reviewing the bills, I noticed there was a payment to Genpack for a little around 100,000 for their tax incentives. And I just want to publicly compliment them when we see these incentives get paid out. That means these companies, as they've come to town and we've offered incentives, if they'll make capital investment, if they'll create new jobs, if they'll pay over the county median and whatnot. And so when we see those incentives paid out, that means they have brought to the table and to our community what they said they would do when they came in. So if any of you have any connections or anything, but I would publicly like to thank them and compliment them for a job well done for the expansion, what they've done in our community.
Skip Sasser's the manager of the East plant. He's a really,
Right.
I know him pretty well. He's a really nice guy. He's one you could reach out to. I can pass that along.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Kit and your department for taking care of a matter so quickly, or you will tomorrow. I had some people contact me about the accidents that are happening in front of the Frontier Homestead with the traffic being cut down to one lane and rear end accidents. There's been 3 of them, like in the last couple of days or so. Like Chief would know exactly, but I suggested that we contact UDOT and ask them if they could post some construction speed zone, particularly there, because we're going from 45 to, well, it's all 45 through there. But the problem is everybody's backed up at the light at Coal Creek and they're all the way back to our cemetery, and people are just not paying attention. They're coming in there at 45 miles an hour. And I guess a couple of them were they didn't slow down at all from what I heard, but we'll get that taken care of. Kit said he was meeting with them tomorrow to discuss. So I thought maybe you could mention that in any areas around town, maybe where most of our speed limits in a lot of those zones are already 25 or 35 anyway, but the 45 down is, people drive a lot faster out there. So
They do.
I thought it would help. So thanks.
Well, and I know the mayor's mentioned in her newsletters at least 2 different times about all the construction, but I really hope the citizens all understand this is going to go on for the next 3 to 4 months. And we have to be cautious driving through our Main Street. Now, I know it's a pain. I've seen some things on Facebook that people have posted, but it is going to be really nice when we get it done, and it has to be done. And we're making a lot of improvements along the way. So just urge everyone to just take time and be cautious when you're driving through these construction zones.
All right. Are there any other comments? Anything from council? Okay, we'll move on to staff comments. Are there any?
I was going to bring up the photos from the aquatic center. Mrs. Hartley brought that up earlier. We did replace 8 trees out there, Kenny, 8. And Kenny and Wade and his guys did a great job up there.
Good. That's great.
Okay.
Do we have good watering system to those trees? Is that normal to lose that many trees?
You have to come talk in the microphone.
Sorry, Ken. I was just curious. It's too bad we've lost that many trees. This seems odd.
Ken Nielsen, Leisure Services. So this is my first kind of summer looking at that. I think those were all mostly this year's culprits. So I don't know that that's an every year thing. It just happens that we lost 8 and they were all in the islands.
Oh, so they're not even out on the street where they might get salt or something.
No, they're in the islands. And so Wade checked the drip system, make sure they're working. So hopefully these new trees take off and we're back to normal.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have anything else? Okay, then we will move on to our business agenda with our public comment portion. If there's anything that you would like to address the council about, now is your chance, as long as it's not an agenda item, so we can deal with them. So if there is anyone. Not seeing anyone. Okay, then we will move on with our consent agenda. Item number 1, approval of minutes dated June 5th and 12th, 2019. Ratify bills dated June 17th, 2019. Approval of single event alcohol permit for a beer block party on July 27th at 233 North 100 West. Approval of single event alcohol permit for beer garden at the July Jamboree Car Show. Approve bids for Munford General Contracting in the amount of $165,553 for the wastewater treatment plant, dewatering building, lift station, and approve an annual blanket contracts and 2-year street light maintenance contract.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll go to the action agenda with item number 7. Consider an ordinance amending the zone from residential agriculture to mixed use in the Iron Horse RDO Pod 1 located near Cedar Middle School.
Gee, Sarah, you're all done.
You can leave that and we have your paper signed for you. Oh, thank God. I gotta go make beer.
So the Iron Horse RDO came through about a month ago. This is that Sitla property. This is the first pod that they're seeking the zone change on to start developing.
Yeah. I can't.
Okay. Comments, questions?
So this is just the amending the zone, because I've seen some, they'll still come back with some plat review and that kind of thing, right?
Just have to come back and subdivide.
Okay.
And we'll see this for, I can't remember how many pods there were, 10, 12 pods.
There's like
We'll see
14,
this.
but it's like next 20 years, we could all be dead. Who knows?
Yeah, we could be.
They've already been to project review to submit a proposed subdivision in this
That's
area.
what it is.
I'm talking about me, not you guys.
You said we all.
Yeah, not everyone in this room.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call starting with Councilwoman Hartley.
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 8, consider appeal of decision to deny a claim.
So
What's he doing
the
here
council, the last time we talked about this, one of the suggestions was, and if I remember correctly, Mr. Benson was on the same page, if the city went in and just replaced the curb gutter and sidewalk that had sunk.
That have been affected, yep.
So I talked with Jeff Hunter about this. He thought the cost to replace about 30 feet would be around $1,500, maybe a little less. So I'd meant to call Dude earlier this week and I just forgot. That's why I ran out at the first of the meeting. So if the council is comfortable with that, I can relay that offer to him. If he is in agreement, I'll have him sign a release. If he's not, then we'll come back before the council.
Okay. So I would move to approve that repair and extend that offer to Dude.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Item number 9, consider an ordinance regulating the location of cargo containers. Anything to add on that one?
So as you recall, we talked a little bit about this last week. Ms. Dickinson brought forward a suggested ordinance on restricting cargo containers. Essentially, it would restrict them in all residential zones in the city with the exception of city property. It also restricted them longer than 6 months for construction or remodeling purposes. It also required them, existing ones that are in place in residential zones, they be deemed a non-conforming use, so they could remain there. And then it required them to be painted to match the existing structure on the property. The I guess this alternative recommendation for the council to consider would be just treating them like we do sheds, requiring them to follow the required setbacks for accessory structures in whatever the underlying zone may be, and having a minimum of a 6 feet setback in the rear of the primary structure. There would be no vertical stacking of cargo containers in residential zones, and at no time could they be used for human habitation. So those are the two options before the city council. City council has the option to come up with their own version, or I think Mr. Phillips talked last week about tabling it. I mean, all those would be on the table.
I guess what I was referring to, at least from my standpoint, is it seems to me that the revised ordinance that city staff was recommending kind of really didn't do much of anything other than maybe the not having people live in and a few things like that. So I'm not sure that would take care of anything. I'm not sure we should pass that one. If council and others are still concerned about what the citizens have brought forth, then I would suggest that we look back and we try and figure out if we can find something that is more compatible and yet addresses the issue, because I do think that the notion of cargo containers can be a real problem. I mean, since this came up for discussion, I've seen them all over town, everywhere. And businesses have them, city has them, private property owners has them. And so how we deal with it, that's the question. I think we certainly, I don't think anyone wants them to be out in the middle of people's driveways or out in front of their homes or businesses. But indeed, in the downtown area until recently, we had a series of them over on 100 West that were stacked behind the old library. They've now since been removed, but I'm not sure we want that in our downtown business district either. So I have some real concerns about this, and it seems to me that there's some real hesitancy on the part of staff and perhaps council, I don't know, but to endorse what our citizens have brought forth. But I don't think what we're proposing is much better. So I'm really conflicted on what to do here.
And you guys got the ones I sent you.
Yes,
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 we
we
did.
did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, we did. And I've gotten some additional material since then too.
And that's all of the ordinances that,
So I'm not sure if we're considering what was presented or we're considering the city staff's or some
We have
hybrid
mixed
thereof.
We have
Yeah.
mixed box.
So the city staffs is the one that was given a positive recommendation by the
Right.
planning commission.
Right.
So that's the one that was, I guess, brought through the process. But of course, I included Ms.
Sure.
Dickinson's as well.
So if we're voting on the ordinance regulating cargo and containers tonight, it's the one that has been brought forth through the process by city staff. Is that correct?
Well, it could be either one. The
That's one
motion
of our
could
options.
it can be
That's
either one,
Okay.
or a hybrid. It could be the city's plus you're required to paint them. I mean,
Okay.
Mayor, may I speak for a moment?
do you guys have anything else you wanted to say following?
I
up with
watched
that?
the entire meeting and I saw the
Good.
whole debate on it. But anyway, just so
Okay.
you know.
You can say something now.
Good evening, Tom Jett. Nationwide, and I'm sure all of us have seen some of the creative changes that we go through as a society, and some people live in tree forts, and some people think living in caves is cool, and now I'm sure most of the people in this room that have any access to the internet have seen cool cargo container homes. There's TV shows on them. There's movies on them. I'm not sure if it's a craze or if it's something to stay. But in this country, we're going through a severe housing situation right now for affordable housing. And many cities, from Park City, that would be on the upper end scale, are using cargo containers. To Salt Lake City, they're using cargo containers for housing. I had a home designed by a certified engineer, Heath Obeson, before his passing. 2 years ago. It was 7 cargo containers. Beautiful home, beautiful. In fact, the exterior is completely sided. One wouldn't even know it's a cargo container unless they probably watched it be built. And sometimes our fears get ahead of the realities of what's going to exist. And sometimes they don't get ahead of them. Maybe that's really the reality that's going to exist. But I think we have to be real careful in trying to monitor and gauge what's going to go on there. I believe society will ultimately have some control over this. We had a very healthy discussion maybe 8 years ago regarding chicken ordinances in our city, and the world was going to end, and people were going to be driven out of their neighborhoods and so forth. Well, we probably that never realized itself. Maybe at least in the circles that I know, there might have been a few left a little frustrated, and I was one of the people that did not support the chickens in the city limits, because even I looked at it and said, is that really a place for us? Well, again, my fears were not realized. And I think that's what we have. A lot of people, they're seeing what is something that's going to happen that maybe never does happen. And when it comes to stacking, mine had 2-story. It was very creative architecturally. Now, I haven't built it. I don't know if I will build it. And I don't want to ask the council or staff to consider my thoughts or my designs as part of the thinking process. I'm just saying they don't have to be trash. And there's trashy homes in this town that the next step would be, well, we're going to dictate you should paint your home or re-roof your house or fix your driveway, or we're just approaching maybe a little bit of a slippery slope. And I think economics will cure these problems and cure the ills with a little bit of time. But between now and then, sometimes we have to live with a little bit of pain for having the freedoms that we do in making our creative choices.
Tom, I think the notion for me, at least, is not the idea of cargo containers. It's what do they look like? I don't think there's a problem if it's sided or if it's aesthetically painted or something. I mean, I don't know about that. And of course, that all depends on its use. It's just where it sits and what is its purpose and how is it used. So,
well, the purpose that I discussed primarily was residential. I know people use them for wood shops because they're affordable and they cannot afford an alternative area, an alternative solution to their out there. I guess it's better than people having lean-tos out in their backyard and things out in their front yard, open and being weathered and rusted away. You know, we have a kind of a, what's worse, kind of a enclosed cargo container, or people just leaving all their stuff out there to weather and dilapidate. And that's just one example. That's not an either or. And so again, we're going through a situation right now. And I remember my daughter here 10 years ago saying she's going to live in a teepee. That was her dream. Oh, she was 13 and she would do anything to move out of the house. But, you know, it just, we go through as society phases and crazes. And so that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would just say that I think the staff's draft of an ordinance does a lot more than you're giving it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think requiring them in terms of placement and setbacks and all of that, I think it actually is a common sense first step. But that's just my feeling. I think.
Yes, my name is Ryan. I'm with AAA Mobile Storage. I'm
State your last name too, right?
Brindley.
Thank you.
Brindley's my last name. I provide cargo containers in Cedar City, all over southern Utah. We've done this for about 35 years now. And kind of maybe to explain a little bit, I'd like to talk about Main Street a little bit and kind of the purposes of cargo containers and what happens. Firework stands come into play when there's fireworks, when stores need remodels. Walmart uses them for storage. A lot of stores use them. They're more of a permanent thing when these stores use them. And so people kind of rent them and use them for a short period of time. And then they move. You'll see some on Main Street, they'll be removed here, but they're here permanent for a fireworks stand. As far as residential goes, we've taken containers to people for years. I can see having a container set back, have it set back in, maybe painted. Maybe that's an option that needs to be in place. But residents should have the opportunity to have a container. That's a freedom that they should have. A container is wind and watertight. When they buy, and not cutting sheds or cutting anything else, when they buy these things, they get something that mice get in, dust gets in. A cargo container provides a place where they have a dust-free environment, no mice, no anything like that. The storage, there's not a better storage solution. Residents should be able to have them. If there needs to be a regulation put in place, it should be a setback. If we want to go a little further than that, painting, but they should be able to have them. CC&Rs should be in place by builders. If they do not want containers in their subdivisions, then move to a subdivision where you don't want a container. But other than that, my feeling is we should be able to have them. There's so many uses for them. We should have containers that look nice. We purposely as a business, we don't put things on Main Street that have writing on them that create an eyesore. That's one thing we will not do. We don't do that. Southern Utah University, when you come into town on the freeway, if you look, they've got about 20 of them that are painted off white. They have them right as you come into town. When you come into Southern Utah University, you'll see those there. And anyway, that's about all I have to say on that. Thank you for letting me speak. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you come up.
Vicki Graham. The ordinance, the way we perceived it, isn't banning cargo containers. I want everybody to understand that. We get that. But maybe based on lot size, you could have a 20-foot versus a 40. Can there please be no graffiti? Can there be no signage on them? What started all of this is there was one in my neighborhood that was painted blue, said Hanjin on the side. I bought for the view, not the view of the blue Hanjin container in the backyard. So that's really what made me start looking at containers and realize how many there are. So we're not trying to ban them, and we're only talking about residential zones. Can they be set back like an accessory building, painted one color and not have any graffiti on them? And that's basically it. It's pretty simple. They can still have them, just make them look nice.
Yeah, I actually
You
don't.
have to say your name.
Tina Dickinson.
Thanks for that.
I think Ryan makes a good point about the painting. The only thing that I would suggest as well is just that we be reminded that the 40-foot are not legal by building code anyway, because anything over 200 feet is supposed to have a building permit and then have a building inspection. And so I don't think we should approve ones that are 40-foot when the building inspector is supposed to oversee those, as well as we brought forth the real concern of burying them. I mean, that's really dangerous. And the stacking looks worse, but it's not as dangerous as burying them. So that's all I want to say, if we could add those in.
I think the cosmetics is, I mean, a little bit of a consideration, but I'm really scared to say if we put that in there, kind of that, I don't know. When we get into telling people how to paint their sheds, I don't know. That's a little touchy without, as he mentioned, without CC&Rs in the neighborhoods where they restrict that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering if I don't know, if, like I said, if they were painted a color, but there again, how do we determine? The term earth tone comes into play a lot. I found out over the many years that earth tones can be anything from, browns, etc., to as wild as lunar green. And I don't know if you've seen lunar green. I know you have. You probably don't know what color it is, but it's very outlandish. So I'm trying to think of how we could. I mean, I like the ordinance that's been drafted as far as meeting the setbacks and everything. I think that's a plus that the planning commission's reviewed. And if we could somehow, Tyler, get something in there about cosmetics. I don't know if we just say painted one solid color, but that's opening what I just said. That's why I don't know how to define it to try and say you gotta paint it. But I agree that they should look nice, in a neighborhood and not a rusted out, piece of junk in the neighborhood, for lack of words. I think that's probably what.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, Ron, we got a house by my house. We got it in our neighborhood that's purple. So do you paint your container purple? That's next door.
It's one solid color.
I guess if that's your preference. I don't know. That's what I'm getting at. It's hard to.
Why I said that.
It's hard to say how to do that.
I'd like to ask
I don't know.
maybe Tyler or Kit, I'm not sure, the question that Tina brought up regarding the size of the container relative to a building permit. Is that true? And then number two, if that is true, nowhere in here even does it address square footage or size of containers, even in the revised version.
Yeah, so I can answer the size version. The cargo container, there's a definition at the top, and it just defines it as a shipping container in accordance with international standards for overseas shipping. It's designed to be mounted on a rail car as freight, or to be put on an enclosed truck trailer in accordance with U.S. Department of Transportation standards. So that's the catch-all language for.
But is that in conflict with what we're asking from our building department?
Well,
Even if they do require a building permit, why would you ban it? Assuming that Ms. Dickinson is right and something of that square footage requires a permit,
Mm-hmm.
seems to me it's already in the building code that it requires a permit. So what's the issue?
Yeah.
If there is a permit that's required, I'm not sure what our building inspectors are going to inspect them for, but I don't see where you would want to just say those are prohibited if they're already covered under another regulatory scheme.
So, Mr. Brindley?
Yes.
So how do you place many 40-foot containers in
You'll
the
need to
city?
come back
Sorry
up,
if you,
Mike.
do you place many containers? I have a 40-foot container. Well, mine might be 54 at my shop that I use for
Okay.
additional storage.
Yes.
It's
we
huge.
do.
I don't see that many. I mean, I drove up Cove Drive today. Sometimes I have tunnel vision. I don't see I'm focused on what I'm doing, but so I saw one on Cove Drive today and it was fairly new.
Mhm.
It was next to their home. I need to start looking, I guess, to see how many are really out there, but that's just a question I have.
You know what? We do a few 40-foot containers. In Cedar City residents, it's probably half and half. It just kind of depends. They're portable, of course. You bring them in, and unless you put them on a foundation of some kind that kind of like a shed is portable. You deliver a shed. The people that bring the sheds, you've seen the Cumberland buildings, they bring them in and they set them down just the same way you'd sit down a cargo container. They're portable. So they can come in and pick them up and move them. And so it's kind of the same type of situation there.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Are yours typically, do you paint them or does the homeowner paint them or the business? How does that work?
We do paint them. We offer to paint them. And so we offer that. If they want to paint those, we offer. So a lot of people paint them themselves. Once they get them in, they'll paint them themselves when they get them.
I totally understand. I think this kind of goes back to being a good neighbor. I think if we could talk to each other as neighbors and work out our differences and maybe approach them, I think we maybe wouldn't have to look at passing so many of these ordinances and laws. And I would hope that would be the case. But I had a friend send this to me once. I'd like to read it. It said, this was written in 1869 by John Stuart Mill. It said, whenever in short, there is a definite damage or a definite risk of damage, either to an individual or to the public, the case is taken out of the province of liberty and placed in that of morality or law. But with regard to the merely contingent, or as it may be called, constructive injury which a person causes to society by conduct which neither violates any specific duty to the public nor occasions perceptible hurt to any assignable individual except himself, the inconvenience is one which society can afford to bear for the sake of the greater good of human freedom. And I think this kind of goes back to what Tom said. You know, when we start saying what color you can paint this and what size, and you're splitting hairs, and it gets. And I have a problem with as many containers as Cedar City has spread out all over town. That we want an exception for ourselves, but we're going to limit it to others. And that I don't know. This is a tough. But I do understand that. I wouldn't want somebody to I wouldn't want somebody to put a orange cargo container in next to my house that's orange with lettering on it. I mean, I would hope somebody would
Talk to you about it.
or not do that, but I don't know. It's just a tough situation.
Right. Thank you.
You can come up.
Hello, Brett Brindley, Ryan's brother. I wanted to just address the front yard situation with the containers. We had an incident out in Enoch that we rented one to some folks. Their home had flooded, and we set the container in the front yard so they could pull the stuff out and put it in. It was just temporary, short term, but a lot of the people in the neighborhood freaked out about it, thought they going to keep that there forever. And we do that some. We rent to disaster companies that, you know, they'll have them temporary 2 or 3 months in a front driveway or something just while they're rebuilding a home. And we do that quite often. And then also people move with them. So we'll set them in a front yard. They'll load them up and we'll move them. You know, we'll move them to a different city or back to a storage lot. But I think that that's created fear with some people. They see them there and they're in the front yard and think this big ugly thing is going to be there. And I don't think that we've placed one in anyone's front yard that they've wanted to keep there permanently. The majority of people that take them, put them in their backyard. And, you know, there are some that put them in their backyard that are ugly, that do, you know, like you said, I could understand that too. And maybe there does need to be, you know, an ordinance there to make the stickers be off them or paint them. But I just wanted to share that and say that about the front yards. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I think you're correct. In 99.9% of the cases, the question comes because there is nothing there that says how long. And of course, that's the question. How long is how long? Originally in the one ordinance, it was 6 months. But they said, well, some construction buildings, and if you're building an apartment complex, it might take 18 months to build the construction of that building. So should it be 18 months? Should it be 24 months? I don't know. But if there's nothing there, somebody can leave it there and say, well, there's nothing that says I can't leave it there all the time. So I think that's the difficulty, and I don't know what the answer is to it. That's why I'm so conflicted.
So let's look at the ordinances we have in place. Maybe I'm still thinking on the cosmetics. If they become a nuisance, you know, or not kept in a sightly manner, you know, they become unsightly or whatever, and somebody, you know, files a complaint, say, with the city against, you know, an ordinance, you know, about upkeep, you know, of a property or a structure. Tyler, is that something that's already covered and we don't even need to say painted? Or I know this is really reaching out, but
right. So the way our nuisance ordinance reads, it's more geared towards broken down cars in front yards and grass that's 3 feet high and drug houses and loud music that's blasting at midnight. If there was a cargo container in the front yard, I don't know if our nuisance ordinance would cleanly address that. And if it was in the backyard and it wasn't painted, it wouldn't address that.
That's a different issue.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, that's.
I think we're just talking about curb appeal or sight, from the street. And I know the trend is, as you mentioned, these new moving cubes that we see all the time where they stack them out in front of the house and fill them up, and the company comes by and picks them up and puts them on a flatbed, and away they go. And so I know they're only temporary, but it's kind of a different issue. But I know there's a lot of trend to use these different types of cubicles for various things. Sure.
So, just state your name again, will you?
Tina Dickinson. Like he said, there's about half around town that are 40 foot. Even though it's required to have permits, people have not got permits for these. And that's why I think it's important we include it in it, because people have them all over. We have them. I've seen them buried. I submitted all the pictures, so you can see some are buried, stacked, and we don't allow for billboard signs. So I don't think we should be allowing for cargo container signs in the backyard. But I just want to clarify, as far as the 40-foot containers, even though the building code covers or says you should have a permit for these, Tyler explained that this current ordinance we have is for when you put that on the street to move. It does not apply to when you put it in your yard, correct? That's what we talked about. The current ordinance that says you have to have a permit.
I'm not sure if you have to have a permit.
There is one for when you're construction. Yeah. So when you put it on the street, there's one for a permit, but if you put it in the yard, there's nothing that covers that at all, except that so what we should be talking about in the ordinance is the 20-footers only, because the 40-footers should fall under, well, I mean, I guess we would need to clarify that the 40-footers would need
What kind
a
of
permit.
permit
You
would
could-
you, what kind of
Yeah.
permit, I mean, what kind of permit do you
So-
does it say
So
you
I-
have to put a foundation under it? I mean,
No.
So Galen
what she's getting
Matheson-
at is, if I renovate my home and I put a dumpster on the street for all my trash, I've got to come in and get a permit from the city.
It's an encroachment permit to leave. Oh, yeah, to leave the dumpster in the street. Yeah, that's correct. Or the pod in the.
but
Right.
what kind of permit for a container?
but you
What
can
does
put-
what does it entail?
But on your own
Don't know.
property, you can put a structure like a shed that's under 200 feet, like, tough sheds or whatever. So the 20-footers could fall under that, and we could have some things that, well, we have to make them look like a shed, more, not just like a rusted cargo container, but the 40-footers should be getting permits, and nobody that's got these has gotten permits. I mean, they're everywhere, the 40-footers.
That's my question.
with
Though.
no
What would
permits.
the
Yeah,
permit entail?
What would the permit?
I don't know what you would do a permit on.
What would you require,
Well,
say,
it's,
the building
it's,
department?
it's considered an accessory structure.
Yeah, that's what
And-
I was just going to say. I think she's talking about the square footage that
Yeah.
for that size.
So you don't have to get a
You
permit
have
to
to have
put a-
some kind of a building or permission, some kind of a permit from the building
Does that make
department.
sense?
What a permit might come in is if you ran power to it or something.
Well, according to Galen Matheson, who I emailed, and I did submit that email, but you would need a permit to get it in the first place if it's over 200 feet, which the 40-footer would be. And then if you needed electricity, you would then need to get another permit. You would also need a permit for electricity for the 20-footer, but you wouldn't need a permit for the 20-footer if it's under 200 feet, which it is. It's 160 feet or so. But so that's, I just wanted to clarify that when you decide on what ordinance to differentiate between the 20 and the 40-footers so that we don't kind of get mixed up with the building department. So.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what they would say if a building official goes out, say it's over 200 square feet, what's he going to inspect?
That's why I wondered if is it just
I
the
mean, is it
setbacks
just the
and-
fact that the side, well, yeah, setbacks could be part of it, but as far as what else? I mean,
If you'd like, we could have Drew come and address
I
that.
was going to say, do you want to have?
I think we ought to have a building official here to maybe to clarify, a little bit on this, because I'm a little confused as to what I do a lot of building, have done, so I'm confused with what our building inspectors are going to go inspect other than setbacks. I get the setbacks. I mean, that's one that I think needs to be in place. I don't want them in the front yard either, but I don't know.
She had a good point about
say-
the other.
Vicki Graham, it's permanent placement of a cargo container in someone's residential backyard. That's all we're talking about. It's a temporary one. They get a permit. It's a building thing and a construction site, and they do that. But we're just talking about permanent placement in a residential zone in someone's backyard. And the permit just covers the fact that they have to have it set back, like an accessory building, has to meet the setbacks and be painted. That's
Not
it.
buried.
Right, not stacked or buried, because it's a residential zone.
So, okay. So if it's
So-
shed type, they can be within 1 foot of the property line.
Say what? I'm sorry, I didn't
I
hear
say
you.
that if it's an accessory or like a shed, you can put them within 1 foot of the rear property line. Or sides where you wear that.
I'm
by
fine with
code.
that, but
Would you? That's
does
what
that
I'm
mean
wondering.
fire? I thought there had to be
Fire
6 feet for
code?
fire.
No, not for a shed.
Really?
They can be 1 foot off the
Like,
property line.
Maybe we discussed this last week, but if we did, I'm sorry, I don't recall. Why did city staff feel that buried should be struck? I mean, what was their concern there? I'm just trying to understand.
Why they shouldn't be buried?
Yeah, because that was struck from what they had proposed to what city staff was proposing. I'm just wondering the rationale.
Because I
We
guess
don't care who
cities-
buries anything in their own backyard.
Yeah, if I want to
Well,
use
it could be a dead body, you know.
if I want to use a ladder that's
There are
not
other
safe,
laws against
should the city be restricting that? If I want to
Gotcha.
put my kids on a tramp,
Okay.
that's it's just
Okay.
yes, it might be unsafe, but shouldn't I be able to bury that and
Okay.
take the risk?
I just wanted to make sure I understood the rationale.
yeah,
Thank
those-
So Tina Dickinson, just to point out though, these things cannot, if you lock them from the outside, then you can't get out. And so it's not just your own kids that might die in there. It could be the neighbor kids that die in there. So I think it is a little bit more of a concern.
Is the council feeling like you guys have a clear direction? Would you like this tabled, then have Drew come? Do you want to keep talking about this?
Mayor, can I just say one thing real fast? I gotta say, it is valid. Carter Wilkie, I think one thing that the council and the city needs to do, because when I think about this, and this goes a lot to what Councilman Cousins and Councilman Adams are saying, you have to make the decision, is this a structure or is this a mobile store? I mean, or is it something that's mobile? And I think if it's a structure, then building permits and things like 400 square feet come into play. If it's not a permanent structure, then it's not a permanent structure.
Right.
And
And it's like out on, well, just Carter, it's like out on Lund Highway. You saw where they've stacked the containers and put trusses on them. That's a structure. So that's what you're talking about.
yeah, and well, I think what I-
Versus portable, where you plop it down, it's portable. It's not.
and I think
it's
that's
not
where
permanent.
I think that's the line that the decision has to be made. Are these structures if it's in somebody's yard, or are these just portable storage devices? You know, I mean, they're easier to pick up and move than most shed. You know, than a-
Depends on their usage. If you're remodeling your home, it's going to be temporary. If you're storing or have a woodshed, it's going to be permanent.
But what I'm saying is, I think the city needs to define in this ordinance. They have to have a definition. These are from now on. You are calling storage containers a structure, an accessory structure versus just a mobile unit. So that's my thought.
Tina Dickinson, that's what the building inspector clarified, that if they're over 200 feet and what they're built of and steel is considered a permanent structure type material. So that's what I was trying to tell what Galen Matheson said.
Hello, Lamont DeMille. I'm actually owner of a property management company. I go and clean and beautify Cedar City. I'm actually working on Bullock Circle, and there's actually a deteriorating shed made out of wood. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen hundreds of wood sheds made just out of plywood, not painted at all. It's an eyesore, pisses off your neighbors, you know. It's the same with a Connex. There's no differential other than wood sheds are less portable than a Connex that's engineered for it. And I'm with Mr. Cousins at splitting liberties of your property ownership, that just another person telling you what you can't do with your property. And I think in the best motion of being neighbors, everybody needs to get along. That's all I have to say.
Thanks.
Leslie Brindley. I want to talk about legalizing what is sightly and unsightly. I feel like that's completely wrong. I feel like it's un-American. I think my neighbor's fence is unsightly. Every other post is broken. I actually don't like the weeds in their yard, and I don't like their dog. And none of those things are illegal. And my neighbor has a right to have a broken fence, and has a right to have weeds, and has a right to have an ornery dog. And I don't like the color of my neighbor's hair. I don't like the tattoo on their arm. I don't like what I like, and what I think is sightful should not be in the legal code. They should have the freedom to like and have and possess and own what they want. And I think that it's completely wrong for a city council to start defining what is sightful and unsightful. If you want to live in a neighborhood that requires CCNRs that say, as a community, we've decided that this is sightful and this is unsightful, then I think that that is a property owner's right to do. But as a city to determine, I definitely don't want our city council running around and telling us that we need to get rid of everything that they don't think is good looking. And I don't think that you would want people deciding that for you either.
Tyler Melling, real quick, I would just like to clarify a point I had made on this issue last week. I think most people, if given the choice and the costs are the same, they would rather have a pretty shed than a Connex container on their property. But with some of our regulations, such as the 200 square foot cap on any outbuildings before you need a building permit, and building permit requirements for electricity and water. Some of those drive up the cost for any units larger than that. So they're getting a 400 square foot Connex box because they'd rather not have to go through the expense of getting a building permit. So while the issue is on the table and while the council's addressing it, I think it would be a timely time that if we are going to legislate anything without buildings and with aesthetics, that we also make it easier and less expensive for people to build pretty outbuildings on their property. So let's look at maybe raising that requirement. As long as nobody's living in there, I don't see any reason why we can't expand it to a 600 or 800 square foot size cap before we need to start getting building permits and things like that. Anyway, I would, if it doesn't come up now, it'll come up later, and I think it's a good time to address that as well. Thank you.
And just to add to Mrs. Brindley, actually, I just used the term sightly and unsightly. It's taken out of our CCNRs where I live. So that's just a term I tossed out that I'm familiar with. I wasn't suggesting we put that in the ordinance because CCNRs in subdivisions do regulate those kinds of things. And I'm not saying we need to do that as a city as a whole. So don't take that wrong. That was just a term I use that I'm familiar with.
And that's a great point.
So
that's a great point because people can choose to live in a HOA or a CC,
Right.
one that's controlled by CCNRs and not have containers. They can make that choice and buy into one of those subdivisions. This whole topic reminds me of the siding ordinance. For 8 years, and every time we've opened that can, we've slammed the lid back down and ran. So there's a lot of slippery slope here. But
So where do we want to go, council?
Okay,
Well,
direction?
This is all debatable and will be a continuing debate, but where we stand now, I would move to accept the ordinance as drafted by the staff and make that our stake in the ground on this. That's That's my proposal.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Councilman Hartley.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
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 Okay, that motion fails. Is there another motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we leave it alone, not touch it.
Is there a second
Ordinance, okay.
to that
Okay.
motion?
I'll second it.
All right, we'll start with Councilman Adams.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes 4-1. So for right now, we'll do nothing.
Thank you, ladies, for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Don't give
that-
up. We'll come back and we'll find something that'll work for everybody, okay? Someday.
Thank you to everyone that came and addressed
And I
us on
appreciate
this.
everybody's comments very much.
Yes.
Okay, item number 10, consider resolution adopting a personnel policy regarding the use of public property.
So as you recall from last week, this policy is in response to House Bill 163. The purpose of this is to make sure city staff is clear when they can use public property and when they can't. It addresses both the use of vehicles and then just equipment from cell phones to backhoes to any other property that staff have possession of just based on being employees for the city. Any questions? You want me to go through specifics?
This is for all government entities. I mean, this would fall under the county as well and
Yes.
the municipalities. Okay.
I think this was I think that we need to teach our legislature to cut the bandage to fit the wound. I think they went way overboard on this. I mean, when you talk about, if you incidentally use a government vehicle to stop and see your mother on the way home from a legislative session and you become a felon and lose your retirement. I mean, I think they went way overboard. I think the legislature needs to revisit this and fix it. But I like the way you drafted it. I like it being, I think most people are honest and do the right things. Obviously, there's some abuses, and I think that those people need to be prosecuted and held accountable. But I think I like the wording of how you did it, and that's kind of what we did in the counties. We left it very vague, that the incidental use is allowed. And I like, because if you start trying to identify every little thing and how many feet you can go out of your way and this and that, it's a mess. And so I'd move to approve what you've put together. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, you had a comment.
No, I agree. I will second that motion.
All right, we'll start with Councilman Hartley.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, item number 11, consider an ordinance including a no parking restriction in section 3510 of the city traffic ordinance on the southwest corner of Coal Creek Road and 300 West.
Move to approve the ordinance.
Second.
All right, we'll start with Councilman Adams.
Aye.
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 And I want to thank Kit for his quick work on this. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Okay, item number 12.
I'm sorry, Mayor, we're just adding that to the big list of
Yeah.
where we've already got it, right? That's how I
Restricted
kind
parking.
of,
Yeah.
at first I thought, man, what are we doing there?
No, it's just one
But then I looked at the
Add to the
picture on
pile.
okay.
And
Thank
Kit did talk with Sunrock too.
I noticed today they were not parking there. I drove on that Coal Creek, so.
Okay, item number 12, consider an ordinance amending the city's open burning ordinance. Phillips isn't even here tonight.
This just creates an exception allowing open burning in established burn pits at Thunderbird Gardens.
Thunderbird Gardens, right?
Yep.
How is
Move to-
this? I'm sorry. How is this information, once it is adopted, I'm assuming that, is it just as is, or how do people find out about it? I mean, obviously the ordinance will be on our website, but I mean, is it just,
They're burning there anyway.
oh, Paul.
So I don't think with the crowd that it's going to reach, they're not going to really worry about
Yeah.
whether we permit it or not, because they haven't seemed to
just
do that.
just get in our open burn pits. Use the pits.
We're
just
Yeah.
making it legal what
All
they're
right.
doing. up
We're trying to make it legal and trying to put a good spot where they can do it
It's like
and
chickens.
have it less
Like
problem.
chickens, everybody had them, we just made it legal to have them.
Right. All right.
Not everybody.
And
had 'em,
word
some
of
had 'em.
word of mouth, that everyone will know
All right. Very
that's
good.
up there.
Very good.
In fact, they may stop doing it because now
Well,
it's legal.
Yeah,
I stopped Councilwoman Hartley, and I apologize. Go ahead.
that's okay. Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll start with Councilman Adams.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Item number 13, consider resolution adopting bylaws for the creation of the Cedar City Active Transportation Committee.
We talked about this last week. If anybody has any questions, I guess Tyler or myself can respond.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Please forgive me.
No,
but
no,
I
it's-
probably that jet lag. I was watching this 3-hour meeting last night. I watched some of it before in the Philippines, but I think I might have dozed off a little during that. But so what is the exact purpose? I know you've talked, Scott, about maybe using the existing CATS bus system to help shuttle people around
Well,
to
that-
school. Is that what this is?
No,
Is
no.
that has nothing to do with that?
No, nothing to do with this. I mean, maybe that's one of the recommendations that comes out of it, but really all it is it's trying to take things like we have a trails committee already, but we're trying to say, how do we get people within our community, in our city, moving actively without vehicles, or getting vehicles to a certain place? And then how do we get to the trails, or how far is it to the Veterans Park, or how can we get people walking, biking, rollerblading, whatever it is they're going to do, become more active, but to utilize the places and to say, if I'm at this point, how far is it for me to go to Walmart? Oh, it's 2.6 miles. And it's just trying to say, how do we get people out of their cars and become more active, utilizing the services and the things we have, and to come up with a transportation plan, an active transportation plan. This is not to create roads, but this is saying, next time we are resurfacing roads on the west side of town, maybe we try and put bike paths on this road, and this road.
I see. Okay.
So it's looking at it holistically,
Sounds good.
but it's not using CATs, unless that's a recommendation they come up with.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Do we have any motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we'll start with, I don't even know who I'm at. Councilwoman Hartley.
Aye.
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 Thanks.
You can start in the middle and go,
I know that would throw everything off. Okay, we'll do item number 14 in a little bit. So, item number 15, consider the approval of the certified tax rate.
Certified tax rate is 0.002231 for general operations and 0.000263 for interest and sinking bond fund. Total certified tax rate is 0.002494. And that is not a tax change in terms of the city asking for more revenue from its citizens. That is simply the calculated certified tax rate from the county auditor.
Yeah.
Can you give me a little tutorial on this? I mean, why does it
And
why does it fluctuate so much
We would
from year
like that
to
in
year?
25 words or less.
Do you want
No,
to
we
hear my
want him to
cheesy
say, we
joke
want him
first?
more words than that.
The mayor didn't like my jokes last week, but I told Paul on my YouTube channel, Jason Does Algebra, has like 2 views. So yeah, I'll attempt to explain the certified tax rate. But many
Who knew
years
the
ago,
finance director was a stand-up comedian?
many years ago, basically the community's leadership said we want X amount of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So they divide that into the value of all the assessed property, and that was your first certified tax rate. So math gets real fuzzy after that. So the county always says we're going to get that original X amount of dollars, and then the new properties that were built after that, they're then assessed at that same rate. So as you start moving through time, 20, 30 years, the math gets very complex. But so again, it was just assess this amount of dollars way back when. So in the meantime, property values go up and down every single year. So they're trying to recalculate that base dollar amount from many years ago and then revalue new properties each year that come online in between. And so that's why the certified tax rate's very confusing, and they calculate that for us. But if my home goes up in value one year and someone else's home goes down in value, we'll be assessed a different total amount of tax. But those are market forces that we don't control. So yes, even though we may not have asked you for more tax dollars. If your home appreciates, you may pay more in tax than your neighbor.
So if the X amount of dollars that they use for the calculation doesn't change, do we get any more? Do we get Z dollars or do we still back at X dollars?
The only time when I use the word more, if we wanted new revenue, we would have to go through truth and taxation, and we would have to say, Mr. Iron County Auditor, we want an additional $500,000 from the community. So then they would add more to the tax rate to generate that new 500,000. But the fluctuating cumulative certified tax rate is on all that existing property, and then of course new property that comes online. So yeah, it fluctuates every year. That's why we're required to adopt it, and there is a process if we want brand new dollars.
0.0031.
Yeah, that's the outlier.
I think I've confused myself with this.
No,
I hope
no,
that makes
that was-
sense.
That was the least
That list,
confusing of all the
that's
confusing.
the outlier.
3.8, now we're down to 2.4. Wow.
So you need this much money to function as a city, and you've got your tax rate based on that valuation. If the value goes up, this rate can go down because you don't need to collect as much.
Mhm.
And if this goes down, the values go down,
Yeah.
you have to collect more, so that rate
Sure,
goes up.
sure.
That's how I've always seen it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
correct. So
'Cause if you
the
look at the
total
chart,
property, maybe this will help.
Goes right with the
The total
recession.
value
Well,
that the county assessed was
just 'cause it doesn't
a little over $2
five
billion.
digits.
That's how they value Cedar City's
It's
property.
right. It's right in
So
the
as
thing.
Councilman Cousins said, if we said we need X amount of dollars and the properties were all valued at 3 billion, then the rate's going to go down.
Yeah.
To collect that amount, where it would be the opposite if we had a housing downturn. So
Thank you. Very enlightening.
Okay.
This is mainly a trick so that you can accuse people of running for office as a tax increase.
That's right. That's right.
Just kidding.
Okay.
Anytime
That's
people
right.
run for office.
That's right.
Questions, comments?
So I think I'll use that this year then. I've brought
As
your
it's going
tax
right-
rate
going the right
down.
Down. It went down.
Look what we did.
Thank
All
you
right.
for that good. That
Can
good
we get
point.
a motion to approve, like back on topic?
Based on that, I would make a motion to approve the certified tax rate for given year from the county, provided to us by the county.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll go back to item number 14 now. Sorry, Tyler, you don't get to do your presentation quite yet. I know. Consider location of gymnasium and ice rink. Would you like an introduction? Like,
We're all
I'm just
looking
not
like,
sure where.
yeah, you all like
Gonna
to
talk.
What more would you like?
Well, obviously,
It doesn't have much more to add.
no, I understand. We know that there's going to be some additional costs, whether the gym is located there or whether the ice rink is located somewhere else. That we established very clear. We don't know what those costs are. I think what our purpose, as I understand, is we have to make the definitive decision of where things are to be located, so then we can move forward in getting some better cost estimates on things.
Yes.
Correct.
Good summary.
Yes, that was a very good summary.
I guess maybe the only question I would have is, before we make any kind of a motion or do anything on this, Dallin, you just flew in from Bend, Oregon, and thank you for sending us the photographs and the stuff there. Is there any additional thing in the past 6 days that we need to know from you based on?
If you're talking, you have to come up and say your name.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just wanted to make sure if there was any
He
additional.
wanted to make sure your legs got nice and stretched out after
Yeah.
being up there.
Dallin Staley. I don't think I really have anything new. I did send an email out, just kind of requesting if it fits the process that we could approve that $1,000 to get the new estimates started, and I guess not waste time if we're changing the location, if that's what we're going to decide to
Do
do.
we know if that's going to be the cost?
I talked to Mark today, and he said, yeah,
He said he was
that would be
quoted
the
for
cost.
Mark, so.
Okay.
So,
And
but that, I
when
mean,
you
that's
say
just
for that
initial.
for it to get started, that's all you're asking, or are you asking for a commitment for the cost of the plans as he gets them drawn?
No, I don't think anyone can really commit to anything because we don't know anything until we get a fairly decent conceptual plan and estimates, and then we can say it's going to be we're going to need $1.5 million from the city, and we're going to this is what the city's in for, and then I guess that's when the big decisions will happen. So so maybe just the last thing to add is, if anyone's extremely uncomfortable with that idea that the city might be in for something like that, I'd rather that if that's, an extremely bad idea to one of you, that you just vote no and don't lead us on with eternal planning. But if it seems like an idea that we want to pursue, then I guess I'm willing to pursue it, assuming we're hopefully pursuing something worthwhile. So
Right. And I think that you felt the support from everybody that we want you to move forward. So I don't know how that would look I don't know how that would even work for us to pay for the initial drawings and whatnot of the ice rink moving. Is that something that we would even, I don't know how we would even approve that, where it would come from? Anybody?
My understanding is, I want to make sure we get this in the right order. We're talking about making a motion to decide the location of the two facilities. And if we make the motion that the gymnasiums stay where they were originally planned to go and move the ice rink to some said location in the property yet to be determined, we would also say, or at least this is a proposal to say, we were asking for an additional $1,000 to assist with the cost estimates for that relocation of the ice rink / roller skate facility, or whatever you want to call it, the pavilion.
Yeah.
Was my understanding from the message that we got from you.
Yeah. So that's what I'd like. I mean, I guess
understand.
maybe just as a show of good faith that it's a very small amount, to preclude a big amount, hopefully later. So
Very small down payment.
So is that your motion? Is that your
Well, I
motion?
haven't said where. I would make the motion that we consider having the gymnasiums located in the original location, which is in the northeast corner of the aquatic center property, and that the ice rink / pavilion roller skate be relocated at some other location on the aquatic center property yet to be determined, and that we assist in the cost estimates for that up to $1,000. That might be a little muddy.
Can we just amend that to say that you're looking at two potential places, right? Northwest corner or the corner down there.
It's better if you don't specify it, because then exactly where the other place would be, so that we can work with Dallin on exactly utilities and what would be the best.
Because I didn't want to leave out options, but
And I think if it's just somewhere that's yet to be determined, that I think is easier than a set spot.
I would second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. You good with that? Okay. Thank you.
very excited and we look forward to
Welcome
this. Thank
home.
you.
Thank you.
Now we are to item number 16, land use liability training.
Does he know I'm on vacation?
I don't think so.
So Mr. Isom gets to hear this twice. That's why he's got such the smile on his
Can I
face.
excuse myself now?
He's so happy to be here. So Irma asked that we do a couple trainings a year. Usually we always do our ethics training, our Open and Public Meetings Act and our Employees Ethics Act training. This is just deals with land use liability. So as I go through this, chances are I'm not going to blow you away with anything, because the Cedar City does a good job of making sure that we do everything by the book. So most of this will just be review, but just a couple things hopefully stand out to you and help you as you make decisions in the future concerning land use. So because land use issues deal with the constitutional right for someone to use their property how they please, it's important that the decisions we make, they're geared differently. So for example, we just had a vote, right, on the ice rink. There's no constitutional guiding influences on how that vote's made. You could have made that vote based on what you feel is best. You could make it based on what's best for the city, what's best for the ice rink, what public clamor was telling you could do. You can do that on an issue like that. But with land use issues, you can't base decisions on public clamor. It's got to be based on facts, based on law, and it's got to be based on some rational decision that you make. It can't just be arbitrary and capricious is the word, just based on what you're feeling that day, what your will is. It has to be based on fact and law. So obviously there's guidelines that lead and guide the city and lead and guide the state of Utah and our nation when it comes to land use. So in the state of Utah, we have what's called the Land Use Development and Management Act. It's called LUDMA. And LUDMA is found in statute. And what LUDMA does is it says, okay, governing bodies over land, if you're going to make rules and regulations and changes on how you develop land and zone it, then you got to follow some guidelines and some principles. So the first would be that we have to have a general plan. That general plan obviously is just the future forecast of what we see coming and how we want to see our city develop. That general plan is important for a couple reasons. One, it gives property owners in that general plan some assurances of what their property can be used for and what their neighbor's property can be used for. It also gives the city some assurances of what we want to promote and the areas we want to put it in. The second thing that LUDMA requires is we need to have a planning commission. And we have that, and they need to be able to appeal decisions from the planning commission to the city council, which we have set up as well. And then lastly, LUDMA is what governs the noticing requirements. And this comes up all the time. You know, was it posted? Was it on the state website? The city goes above and beyond what LUDMA requires. We put it on our Facebook page. We put it on our city website. We put it in the paper, and we put it on the state website as well.
So Tyler, the sunshine laws falls under this LUDMA?
What do you mean by sunshine laws?
Just noticing of meetings and those kind of things?
Well, so noticing of like public meetings, that's under the Open and Public Meetings Act. But when it comes to like zone changes, general plan.
More of the planning commission notices. Okay.
Yeah, that falls under LUDMA.
Oh, I got you.
So the tools that the city has to develop land is that general plan, which we spoke about, zoning ordinances, which regulate uses on property. It also regulates setbacks. We also have our subdivision ordinance and our RDO ordinance. Those are kind of the main tools that we have to kind of lead and guide developers on what they can and can't do with their land. One resource that the city council should be aware of is called the Land Use Academy of Utah. If you were to Google that, you would find videos, training, materials on every land use issue you could think of in the state of Utah. It's a great resource, something that I go to often, and it's all free. So with that being said, I'll just kind of cover 4 areas that can create some problems for cities when it comes to land use liability. So the first would be immunity. So you sit on the city council, as long as you're making decisions in your official capacity based on established law, you're immune. If someone was upset that you rezoned their neighbor's property into something they didn't like, they could sue the city. They could try to sue you individually if you voted in favor. But as long as you're acting in your official capacity and you were acting in accordance with established law, you have immunity. So eventually you'd be dismissed from that. Now on the flip side, if you voted on something and there is some sort of proof that you acted maliciously or there was fraud, some misconduct, bad faith, you did it for personal gain or political gain, well, that immunity could go away. So that's just something to be aware of, and it's important that we're always making these decisions and we're declaring ethical issues that may come up. When it comes to conflicts of interest, my encouragement always is to run it by me. I'm kind of even if I give you the wrong advice, if you show you came to an attorney to seek advice, you would still have that immunity because you did everything right. They can't claim that you did anything maliciously. The second issue would be making decisions versus based on facts and then public clamor. So we kind of mentioned that already, but the decisions that the council makes, they need to be based on, and this is case law here. I'll just quote it. It says, when making decisions, you should, quote, analyze and deliberate upon questions of fact, upon the application of law, and upon considerations of policy, which bear upon the problems with which they are confronted. So that's advice given to the city council. So here's an issue that comes up, and I've seen it come up with our planning commission and the city council. So our general land use plan says we want this area to be high density, right? We want this area to be high density around SUU. So there's some people that don't like that, and that's fine. But when the general plan says this is what we foresee, and we have a developer that comes in and purchases property with the expectation that he can build high density housing in an area, and then the city says, whoa, wait a second, we don't like that. We're going to pull a carpet from under you. We're not going to let you do what our general plan says you can do. Well, then that's when a city gets themselves into liability issues, because we have someone who has an expectation that the general plan is going to be followed and an expectation that their investment is going to be, I guess, furthered along because of the general plan. If we change the game on them, cities get themselves in trouble with that. The next issue would be condemnation versus inverse condemnation. So we're dealing with the condemnation issue right now with our sewer line. Condemnation is initiated by the government. It's for a public use, and the Fifth Amendment says that we need to give them just compensation. So that's pretty, I think everyone's aware of kind of that side of things. Inverse condemnation is also called a regulatory taking. That's initiated by the private property owner. They're initiating it because the government is depriving their property based on regulation. And as a result, they're asking for just compensation. So an example of this would be up in Provo a few years ago. There's an area of the city that's highly used for rentals to accommodate the two universities up there. And the city went in and regulated it so a lot of those rentals could not be used anymore. So you have these investors that have come in, purchased their property based on what the city said they could do, and then the city changed their regulations, made it so they couldn't rent it out. So they sued, and the court agreed that, and these are kind of the elements they look at. Was there an economic impact? Was the regulation inferred with investment-backed expectations? And was this economic impact the result of government action? So those are just some things to be aware of. We haven't experienced that as Cedar City, but we can, if we overregulate, we could be sued for inverse condemnation and have to pay whatever that loss of financial expectation would be.
Can you go in and change the general plan after the fact and say, we've now adopted this area of town as of X date when the general plan is approved, and it no longer is going to be high density, let's say. We've decided it's going to be residential estates. And if somebody's purchased already and built, I guess they are grandfathered in. But what if they haven't built yet?
Yeah. So yeah, someone owns property out west of town. It's R3.
Mm-hmm.
They plan on building apartments. The city comes in and says no.
And right now in our general plan, it says you can, but we update our general plan.
Yeah. So there's a couple things we'd have to look at, right? We'd have to see what the current zoning is. If the zoning matched up with the general plan and we came in and switched that on them, and they had, that could cause the city some issues. So the general plan can change, and that's going to be okay. But if we couldn't change the zoning on them, if that makes sense.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, but it seems a little bit at odds with itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why usually it's always the property owner that's approaching the city. We want to change the general land use plan. They have no vested right. They don't have an expectation that has to happen, right? So that's why the decisions you make on whether we should change the general land use plan, if we should change the zoning, that has impacts, not only that day, but going forward. And we see that by our golf course. That comes up every month. Sometimes you just don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so the last one kind of coincides with your question, Mr. Phillips. It talks about vested rights. So when a developer comes in and they submit a land use application, and according to their land use application, they meet the zone and they meet all of the requirements the city has. When that application is complete, they vest in whatever the city ordinances says at the time. So even if we're in the process of changing our zoning requirements, if that vote hasn't taken place, they vest in what the law is at the time the application's handed in. So,
okay.
So that's really it. That's just kind of a preview on just a few things that come up from time to time. Really, the big thing that most cities can get themselves in trouble in is just trying to change the game on developers when they've bought in and they have this expectation of what we told them they could do, or there's some hiccup with LUDMA. We didn't get notice out. It wasn't posted. And that happens from time to time, just at no fault. It's just, there's a lot to have to make sure everything gets done. But those things, I think the city does a pretty good job of making sure we cover.
So Tyler, this LUDMA, is it a Utah or is it nationally? Is it a Utah thing?
It's Utah. I'm sure every state has its own version.
Because when you say that, what piqued my interest was a lot of people that are really anti-zoning refer to Houston, Texas, where they have absolutely no zoning, and they claim that I haven't researched it a lot, but they claim that it's work because the market's just kind of taking care of itself, and so they must not have that same kind of law down there, right?
Right. Yeah. There's no zoning laws in Houston. You can build a Home Depot and right next to it, put a retirement home, and next to that, a dog food manufacturing company.
Right.
Wow.
But yeah.
Did you know that?
I knew that any zoning, but I just never.
I hear that reference
Do
a
you
lot.
have any other questions for Tyler?
Tyler, thank you.
Thank you very much for doing that.
Yep.
All right, Craig, you're on.
Move to adjourn this meeting and start vacation.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
You going to Lake
Where are you taking us on?
All right.
You said we start vacation.
You're welcome.